I recently endured my first actual psychosis, and I was convinced while it was happening that I had been mega dosed on bad acid. It lasted for 3 days, but unlike acid, it got increasingly worse with time. On day 2, I tried to go to rehab, but it takes months to get in. On day 3, I begged to go to the hospital, and Shirley told me, the doctors, that it felt as if I'd been given LSD that had been left in a room with the many faces of death videos. Horror vids of one of my punk friends dug up when I was 14. I hadn't thought about it in years. I'm 31. Looking back, I'll never know, but as I wean off my antipsychotics, that same trip starts to creep in on a regular basis. I can control it with CBD and logic, and talk therapy seems to be working. 3-week half-life, so I know I'll be coming down for 15 weeks. I have no desire to partake in any psychedelics now, like food poisoning. I'm deterred completely. Do any of you find a similarity between acid and psychosis? Me and my girlfriend partake in psychedelics, but we both also went through psychosis. We talked recently about how we found an immense similarity between the psychotic mind and the mind tripping on acid. Almost like the same logic applies. Wondering if any of you guys have done acid and been through psychosis, find a similarity between them. Before the term psychedelic was coined, these class of drugs, especially LSD, were called psychomimetics, which translates to mimicking the symptoms of psychosis. Initially, these drugs were given to patients suffering from schizophrenia as they could finally feel normal and therapists could engage them in conversations to better help them. I would always say we are basically schizophrenic for 12 hours whenever tripping on LSD. The psychotic drowns in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight. I feel this quote sums it up nicely. I've been through psychosis because of acid, so I can't really compare, but now that it's mostly over and I'm getting better, it does feel like my thought patterns are like when I'm on acid. I have a manic depressive family member. When they're on a high or manic, it's eerily similar to a person experiencing a bad trip. Not saying that's true for all manics, but something I noticed years ago with this particular person. I've never been in a genuine psychosis, but on high doses of LSD after an ego death experience, I felt like I was in a similar state. I still had insight, meaning I could understand my reasoning was incorrect and I wasn't in the thick of it, but I noticed I felt my ego merge with the universe / God earlier, but the feeling of God continued going afterwards for a little while. I knew everything was one, so other people were equally God, but I still identified strongly with that. I don't think this is necessary delusion. It could be a matter of perspective, but definite similarities with psychosis. Increased pressure of thought, rapid speed flow of thoughts. I would make connection with things that didn't make sense, e.g., this song is speaking to me personally. My thoughts were sometimes incoherent. Language is difficult to use properly, but I had a feeling of deep insight. Confusion about what is real and possible. Mania-like feelings like you're on a roll and are unstoppable. Discovering the truth. Other than being very intense, much too intense for my setting, this wasn't really unpleasant, but I was aware I was on the edge of delusion. I think at high doses, psychedelics can definitely induce states where you're a temporary delusional psychotic. That's not necessarily bad, and in the right context could be transformative, but in the wrong context with the wrong person, it could lead you to act inappropriately under the influence or leave you spun and confused afterwards. With some experience now, I have a decent ability to recognize when or if this happens, when my mind is restlessly searching for an explanation / meaning to what I'm experiencing and it's tempting to buy into it. And when it does, I detach myself from my thoughts for a while until they calm down. Some experiences are beyond words. It can be scary at times, though, because it feels like a lack of control or way too much control of your own mind. I guess everybody experiences these things differently, but it's easy to make a long list of similarities. Making connections, correlations between random fragments of information, believing trivial remarks, song lyrics have a deep personal significance / secret meaning, general disproportionate sense of importance placed on events, thinking someone else is controlling your thoughts / you are reading controlling someone else's thoughts, unexplainable feelings or sense of total detachment, thinking you're God or an instrument of God, delusions of grandeur, etc., hallucinations. Psychotic breaks and psychedelic drugs can be very similar in a number of ways. I can't even list them all. Psychedelic drug use is also known to spark psychotic breaks or advanced psychosis in people prone to similar states of mental illness and is not advised. You're kind of playing with fire if you've already had psychotic episodes, assuming you don't want to fall back into those patterns. I have experienced psychosis one time due to bad sleep deprivation due to opiate withdrawals, and holy shit, while I was in great physical-only agony, the things I experienced there rival a profound psychedelic experience. A lot of these things I dreamed experience still really stick with me. It was a textbook hero's journey. Not sure about psychosis, but the paranoia you get from strong cannabis closely resembles schizophrenic tendencies, from what I've been able to conclude. Wouldn't be surprised at all if acid is able to open the pathways that are otherwise always on for people in more neurodivergent states. The mind is a complicated thing. I'd say there's always going to be similarities of feeling in anything that takes you out of normal thought patterns. Being fucked up on a drug like this, for all intents and purposes, a temporary controlled state of mental illness. But then we'll get pretty rapidly stuck into that whole philosophical debate about what mental illness really even means if we carry down that thought path.